Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of our new Four Lads show, This Week in History. For those that haven't seen it, basically we look over the next 7 days, we go through them one day at a time, things that happened, events in the glorious past of Rangers Football Club over 154 years. And tonight, my special guest, back again through popular demand, is the one and only Kenny Stewart. How are you, Kenny?
I'm not bad, mate. Popular my backside, but there we go. Thanks for having me back on, mate. Really enjoyed it the last time, so looking forward to this. And no doubt I shall get an education because it's good fun.
I'll get something completely wrong and somebody will tell me in the comments, but time will tell. So tonight, as you know, this goes out every Thursday. So this is from Thursday, June the 25th to July the 1st. And so obviously we're going to start with June the 25th. I'm not going to take you too far back. It's not too far back for experienced gentlemen like us. Probably the younger crews, I think this is ages ago. June the 25th, 2004. So in a pre-season, when Alec McLeish brought in several new players for not a lot of money, he brought in the likes of Marvin Andrews, he brought in Dado Purcell, Nacho Novo, Boomsong, Alec Ray, brought in all those players, and then he spent more in a transfer fee than he spent in all the rest of them put together that summer. And he brought in Serbian international midfielder Dragan Mladenovic for £1.1 million from Red Star Belgrade. So before I go through his not very illustrious Rangers career, what's your memories of Dragan Mladenovic?
Big, tall, skinny guy, not very good. That's about it.
That sums it up beautifully, actually. Big nose as well. I did say when I launched this show, I'm not just going to talk about all the good stuff, because sometimes we lose games, sometimes surprises happen, sometimes players leave we don't want to leave, and sometimes we sign players who we think are going to be really successful and they turn out to be a pig in a poke. And this, for me, is a great example of buying a player who was just completely unsuited to the Scottish League. And I'd love to say we've not made that mistake again since, but I'm afraid it's been all too common over the last few years. So Dragan Mladenovic was, when we signed him, the headlines in the papers at the time said we had signed the Serbian Zidane, which made it sound as if we had just bought a superstar. He was in the Serbian national team. Excellent. He made his debut in a Champions League qualifier against CSKA Moscow. I don't know if you remember it, but we'd lost away from home 2-1. We then played them at Ibrox on the Wednesday night. We drew 1 each and got knocked out. Went down in the UEFA Cup. My main memory of that in it is Marvin Andrews played up front for the last 5 minutes and we were chasing a goal. That's all I can remember about it. He then played on the Saturday at Parkhead against Martin O'Neill's Celtic. Started the game and looked like a rabbit in the headlights. He ended up going off in the second half at some point. He'd done absolutely nothing. The game completely passed him by. It ended up he made just 8 appearances for Rangers. 8 starts and 1 substitute appearance. Do you remember who we bought him to replace? Do you remember who we had sold, the midfielder we had sold that summer that he was meant to be the replacement for?
There's
a quiz question, eh?
Was it Barry Ferguson? Was it?
I'll give you a clue. He's now a manager and he's just won the league.
He's a manager and he's just won a league
in England at Arsenal.
Oh, Mikel Arteta, really?
Yes.
No, I wouldn't have got that, mate. I would not have got that.
So we sold Arteta at the end of the previous season, well, into summer. He went to Real Sociedad, went back home briefly, and Mladenovic was meant to be his replacement as the playmaker in the middle of the park. And then strangely, I said he only played 9 games for Rangers, only 8 starts. By New Year, he was behind the likes of Hamed Namucci and Stephen Hughes in the pecking order for a game in midfield. And we sent him out on loan. And where did we send him on loan to? Real Sociedad, because they had just sold Mikel Arteta to Everton. So he replaced Arteta twice. done absolutely nothing in Spain, get punted back to us at the end of the season, having done 0 for Real Sociedad. And Rangers then decided to give him a free transfer, even though he had 3 years left in his contract and he returned to Red Star Belgrade. So a tremendous example of reputation, big tick, transfer fee, big tick. But then Scottish football, the big cross. And I'd love to say that we've learned from that, but I think even in the recent past, there's been similar type examples. I won't say exactly the same example, but similar examples of players who, just the first 2 or 3 times you see them, you think, this isn't the league for them. And unfortunately, that's what he was like.
He actually was. I'm surprised he played that many, because I can barely remember him. But I'm totally with you. I was at the CSK Moscow game, and that game passed him by, if you remember.
Yeah.
He was terrible, and it was he was one of those guys that you very, very quickly realised he's too slow. He wants too much time, and you're just not going to get it here. And he didn't take to the physical side of the game at all, if you remember, either. He just didn't like it. I remember, I don't know what game, I could not remember what game it is now, but somebody whacked him right up in the air in the first 5 minutes of a game at Ibrox, and that was him done. He just didn't fancy it at all. And I genuinely can't remember who it was, David, because my memory's absolutely shocking, and it's 20 odd years ago. But I always remember just looking at my mate at the time thinking, what is this? So, no, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that he got his free transfer, put it that way, because he wasn't cut out for Rangers, was
he? A number over the years, decent-sized transfers, and end up with 3 of them. Did he get any money for them? I'm actually going to talk. Well, I'm going to briefly mention another one towards the end of this podcast. But yeah, the long and the short of it was that summer that we brought in Mladenovic was still a hugely successful one, because the likes of Purcell and Novo and Marvin Andrews and Boomsaw and Alec Ray were the spine of a team that went out and won the league in the League Cup that season. Got the Helicopter Sunday season. McLeish got most of it right. He just happened to get it wrong when he had a checkbook and some money to spend. The rest of them were all. I think Novo was the only one that cost a fee. I think he was about £500,000, and the rest of them were all Bosman transfers, all free transfer. So
yeah,
that was June 25th, 2004. So
no, I was going to say that, when you look back in that season, it was brilliant. And that was the season when we had decided, or David Murray had decided we were downsizing properly, and he didn't give Alec much money at all. It was about a couple of £1 million in total he got, wasn't it? And most of it was spent on the big Serbian chap. Dearie me.
Yeah, I know. So that was June the 25th. I'm going to go a little bit further back, June the 26th. I'm not sure if you'll remember this or not. June the 26th, 1978, demolition begins on the old Rangers End terracing at Ibrox, which is to be replaced by a new 7,500 all-seated capacity stand known as the Copeland Road Stand. This would be the first stage of the multi-million-pound redevelopment at Ibrox, the brainchild of Willie Waddle following the Ibrox disaster, where Rangers would become, or Ibrox would become, a virtually all-seated stadium. We kept the enclosure for a few years, remember. I think what I would say about that is that I know we've got the John Gregg statue, we've got the memorial outside the Copeland Road End, but for me, the memorial to the 66 that died in 1971 is actually Ibrox Stadium itself. It's actually those stands. They were the reason why we decided to go with the modernisation before almost anyone else did. Most others were actually forced into doing it after Hillsborough. But we had, Ibrox was 7, 8, 9 years old by the time Hillsborough went up. Do you remember much about the Ibrox Stadium before the stands went up? Was that before your time?
It's kind of just about before my time. I do remember it vaguely, Davey, but what I remember more is exactly what you're discussing, because I think it was the summer of '78, about the end of that summer, that I was in the BB, and the BB did a stadium tour, and I remember the work just starting weirdly when I was going in. So that's still quite a vivid memory for me, because I remember managing to get actually onto the pitch and stuff like that. No, you know yourself, you're not supposed to go on the pitch, but I actually thought, I'm having a wee walk on that, and I managed to get 3 or 4 steps in and had a proper look about. But it was just at the very beginning of it all happening, Davey. So yes, weirdly, I do remember it. Don't remember much apart from that, if you know what I mean. But you are absolutely spot on. The Ibrox, as it stands today, is the memorial for the 66 for me, and it always has been and it always will be, and it's why it's our home. And no matter what we do to it in future, that will always be the case, won't it?
Yeah, and I remember getting a little bit steamed up one Monday night in the podcast. It was the day after the cup tie against Celtic, when all the graffiti had been put on the Broomloan stand by the other lot, and I had this rant about. I've got this thing in my head that any away support, I don't care who they are, any away support are basically inside a memorial when they're inside Ibrox. I think I'm just the right age for this. And anyone who disrespects those 66 folk inside Ibrox Stadium, they don't get tickets at the next game. They just don't get back the next time. And if they come back after that, and if they misbehave, then the next 2 games they don't go. And I've got that in my head. I would just do that, because I just think there's some things way beyond football and football rivalry, and that's one of them for me. That's one of them.
I totally agree with you, and I actually would go. If I'm being honest, I would probably go a stage further. If they do it and they get a ban because of it, if Rangers put a turn and said, "Look, we're just not giving you tickets," and if you do eventually bring them back, if it ever happens again, just tell us, you're never getting back in. They're just not going to do it. And don't care, and don't give 2 hoots about what the SPFL or the SFA say. Just turn and say, well, deal with it. You put a law in place, a rule in place, that if you do that, you get a lifetime ban, and only then will we turn around and consider bringing any of these Neanderthals back, because at the end of the day, Davey, you'll be the same as me. I know plenty of decent Celtic supporters, and they're appalled by this.
Absolutely.
You know, and at the end of the day, you're desecrating the dead, and it's not acceptable in any walk of, society, So I just don't really understand why anybody could lower themselves to do that. But it's the kind of dafties that you're dealing with, I suppose, that seem to think it's funny or whatever it is, Davey, and it's for attention, and it's very, very. It leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. And I was a little bit like you. I think I was on with you that night that you were getting a proper round up. And no wonder, David, we come from an era or a generation, if you like, that for both sets of sports just wouldn't be acceptable. So I don't understand some of the younger, more modern fans these days and why they would go down that path, because I mean, I can go on here, but I'm not going to.
No, I know. So I'll just talk a little bit about the stadium before I go into the next date. Then, so I'm old enough to remember the old Ibrox. So it's a long time ago now, though. But the things that we lost by putting the stands up were things like standing in a big group of your pals, because it all got lost, which I think a lot of the older guys really missed, actually. But daft stuff, to like, you had to go up these big steps and then down into the terracings. The steps went right up the outside, then you come down into the terracings. The red stanchions you stood against, you had to buy a programme to get the halftime scores. The halftime scores weren't announced. The programme said that a wee thing in the back, was all the fixtures on it in the order letter. So A was Aberdeen against somebody, B was Celtic against somebody, D was Dundee against somebody. And then the big guy came on with a wheelbarrow, and he put the scores up in a little grid at the wall, and you had to look and find somebody with a programme. 1-0. What game's that? Oh, Aberdeen's beating Celtic 1. No good. it was crazy stuff. Yeah, the guy with the box of cardboard, the cardboard boxes selling Christian rolls and stuff like that. It was different era. But the one thing I will say about when the new stands went up, it coincided with John Gregg's reign as manager. He took over just when it was happening, and he had a team to rebuild. And unfortunately, he didn't get probably the money he needed to rebuild that team because the stadium was going to be built at the same time. So the first season there was no Coton Road. The second season there was no Celtic End. The Broomloan went up. The third season there was no Govan. There was nothing facing the main stand because the Govan stand was going up. So he was in his fourth season before he actually had an Ibrox with an atmosphere, with a proper atmosphere in it, which I think didn't help. I still think he made a lot of mistakes. I'm not sure he would have won that much anyway, but I don't think it helped the fact that Ibrox wasn't quite Ibrox for 3 or 4 years, and I think he was too reliant on a lot of older players because he didn't have the money to replace them all at the one time. So I think there was a few things in that. But hey, look at the stadium we've got now, though. Wonderful, isn't it?
It's the best stadium on earth, mate, for me, and it always will be. And yeah, there might be more modern stadiums nowadays, but there's nothing beats Ibrox when it's rocking. Nothing. Yeah. And I've been in a many a stadium over the years, and I can categorically say that, and without a hint of a blue tinted spectacle on, mate, that I genuinely believe that when Ibrox is rocking and it's at its best, nothing beats it. Nothing. It's like home. That to me, yeah. It is literally like home, and it's where when you look back, you're slightly older than me, Davey, but I'm 56, and I just look back on it and you think there's too many memories here. It is very, very special, and it is, as you say, Willie Waddle's legacy also, isn't it? That he literally turned and said, "This is what we are going to do," and fair play to the man, because he's a man I genuinely don't remember, to be honest with you. I just don't. I'm too young to remember him as such, but yes.
I actually think that's why he gave up the manager's job, because he had this absolute vision that he wanted to turn Ibrox into somewhere that no disaster could ever happen again. Because obviously he led the club through its darkest hour in the start of 1971. Because I'm not actually convinced that he didn't want to be the Rangers manager anymore. I just think he thought, I couldn't be the Rangers manager and oversee this as well. So, and that was more important to him. And he had Jock Wallace as his right-hand man anyway. So he knew it was in good hands. Let's put it that way. So, Ibrox Stadium, 1978, the Copeman Road stand started going up. So on to June the 27th, 1991. See, you'll definitely remember this. Rangers manager Walter Smith makes his first signing by spending £1 million on Hibs goalkeeper Andy Goram. Now, there's a first signing for you. We might even have a debate as to whether he actually signed anyone else that was better value for money than that £1 million was, because I'm not so sure he actually did. He signed a lot of incredible players, but that was his first signing for Rangers, Andy Goram. So I think we've done first and favourites, and both of us were of the opinion Andy Goram was the greatest goalkeeper that we've seen ever wear the Rangers jersey. So what about the signing of Andy Goram for £1 million? How does that one grab you?
Aye, old Walter, he was a wily old fox, wasn't he? He knew a player when he seen one. Listen, we could talk about Andy Goram forever. I'm like you. We've discussed this a few times now, actually, but there will, for me, I don't think I'll ever see a better goalkeeper. I think we've discussed it on First and Favourites. You say, I actually don't know if I said this on the show. I can't remember, but there was a period for about 2.5 years, just over 2.5 years, where quite genuinely, and this might sound incredible for younger listeners, 2.5 years where he didn't make a single mistake. It was quite mad. Not for coming for a ball. Not, to be fair, the only thing I would suggest is that the game is slightly different now in terms of the ball at the keeper's feet. and he wasn't brilliant with the ball at his feet. There's no question of that. But he didn't need to have that. That wasn't an issue back then. But he didn't make and eventually he made a mistake. The first mistake he made was it away at Tynecastle?
Oh yeah, when he first joined, he made 3 real blunders in the space of about
flag as well.
And the cup semi-final against Hibs,
Keith Wright scored, wasn't he?
Aye. And there was a few grumblings after 2 months, say, because he had made these 3. He made the mistake that knocked us out of the European Cup. He made the mistake it cost us the League Cup. And there was a few grumblings. What have we done here? This guy doesn't look up to it. And as you say, I'm struggling to remember the next bad goal he then conceded.
I can remember it. It was because I was at it. It was up at Pataudry, and he came for a cross and he missed it, and somebody stuck it in at the back post. That was the first mistake in 2.5 years. And do you know that way? Even at the game, you were kind of laughing. You went, "Geez, he's actually caused us a bit of a bother there," because it's just something he didn't do. I mean, I can look back at Andy Goram, and as you say, pound for pound, it must be one of the greatest signings that, never mind Walter, Rangers have ever made. Because how many points a season was a man worth? The European run in 92, 93, he was just sensational. It's just the best goalkeeper. As I say, for that period of 2 years, I have no doubt in my mind he was the best keeper on the planet. People would talk about Schmeichel and others, but for me, he was actually better. So Walter was a sharp and smart cookie when it came to knowing what he needed. And at that time, we did need a new keeper, didn't we? We had the foreigners rule or whatever it was called at the time, and he had to get a Scottish keeper in.
Yeah, I remember when it came in, the 3 foreigner rule came in at first. I remember some of the wags in the terracings called it the 8 diddies rule because you had to play 8 diddies after that. But anyway, Goram. I totally agree with you in terms of there was a 2 or 3 year period that I wouldn't have swapped him for anybody else in the world, without doubt. But he also really suited that dressing room that Walter Smith built for me, because he was another one of these guys that just hated losing. He hated it. Now, he hated Celtic as well, which was an even bigger tick, if you like. But a bit like younger guys saw Alan McGregor, and the way he hated conceding goals and hated. Goram was exactly the same as that. He was the prototype for me. The first goal looked as if he was going to strangle somebody if they made a mistake in front of him. I mean, let's be honest, he wasn't that tall. He wasn't that fit. he wasn't shapey an athlete or anything like that, but we all talk about the old firm games, especially the games at Parkhead, because let's be honest, he just put up a brick wall at Parkhead for about 2 seasons. I mean, it was almost Tommy Burns with the famous, Andy Goram broke my heart in his gravestone. I remember that quote. No wonder, because we used to go there and Celtic with bats, and Goram just pull out save after save, go off in front of him, winning tackle after tackle, and then they get through him. Goram was saving it. But for me, the Celtic games were the kind of icing in the European games were the icing in the cake. All these games you don't remember exactly what game it was. It'd been, I don't know, home to Airdrie or away to Dundee, or games that ended up 1-0 or 2-1, and there was a save during that totally changed the game. We didn't go goal down, or they didn't equalise or whatever, because Andy Goram and 1-on-1 through your go through when Andy Goram was in goal. I was still quite confident that they weren't going to score. He was the best as far as and I think the last thing I would say is that you mentioned season 92-93. Rangers won the treble. They went 44 games undefeated. They went within a goal of getting to the Champions League final. Didn't lose a game in Europe all season, and yet they scored well over 100 goals. And yet the guy who was the unanimous vote as the Player of the Year was the goalkeeper, which I think just spoke volumes for how good he was. It's
sensational, isn't it? Genuinely, he was just a phenomenon at times. And I think we discussed this previously, but there was a game up at Aberdeen where we were under siege for 90 minutes, and we went up the park, scored once. Big Hateley scored an absolutely magnificent header, and the performance that night is without a shadow of a doubt the best goalkeeping performance I have ever seen in my life, Davey. It was just unbelievable. He was like a quite literally like a brick wall. You just couldn't get past him. And I was at that game. I think I've told you that before, and I just could never quite explain it to anybody how genuinely magnificent he was. There was 4 or 5 world-class saves. There was 10 or 11 top-class saves. You know, it just went on and on and on because we were under siege, and Aberdeen were a good side back then, as you will know. And he just was unbeatable. And as you say, 5'10", but a rubber ring around his belly, you know, liked to drink, liked to smoke. I mean, he was just not an athlete at all. But at that point, without a shadow of a doubt, for me, the best keeper that I'd ever seen.
Yeah. And unfortunately, obviously, taken far too early, unfortunately. In fact, it was almost this time of year, just into the start of July, that he died, I'm sure. But the goalie, if ever MD had the perfect nickname, Andy Goram had the perfect nickname, because that's exactly what it was. He was the goalie. And for as long as there's a Rangers, folk will remember him. You know, talk about the Alan Mortons and all these guys for years and years ago. He'll be one of the names that in years to come, even though generations haven't seen him, they'll all talk about the goalkeeper you've got to compare yourself to is Andy Goram. I think it's going to be as simple as that. So that was June the 27th. Now, you know, Kenny, I always do one of these really old ones every week. So it's June the 28th. It's time for you just to sit back, have a drink and listen to me for 5 minutes, I'm afraid, because this is a player you definitely didn't see. June the 28th, 1869. So 3 years before Rangers were even formed. June the 28th, 1869, a chap was born in Govan by the name of John Barker. Now, before I do anything else, I've been trained to put pictures up. There he is. There is John Barker. It doesn't he look like a Victorian gentleman? Not a well-known name. So let me just talk to you about why. Oh, what have I done here? Hold on, there we go. I'll talk to you about why I want to talk about him. John Barker's got a unique place in Rangers history, and I'm going to explain what that unique place is. So he joined Rangers in 1892 from a club who don't exist anymore, called Linthouse, who were a club in Govan. He joined Rangers in 1892, as I said. He was a left winger. And in 1893, the year after he joined, Rangers played Celtic in the Glasgow Cup final. The Glasgow Cup had only been formed 2 or 3 years before that. Rangers had never won it. And Rangers beat Celtic that day for the first time ever. So I talked in a previous pod in this about Celtic's formation in 1888. Silver spoon in their mouth. They got all the best players in the country, all the best Catholic players in the country, joined them straight away, and they were a winning team straight away. It took Rangers the best part of 5 years to beat them. And they beat them in the Glasgow Cup final in 1893. They beat them 3-1, and John Barker scored the first goal. So the first tick for John Barker is that he scored the opening goal the first day Rangers ever beat Celtic in a competitive game. But it gets better. It gets better. So later in 1893, Celtic had won the league, unfortunately. So at the start of the following season, first Rangers-Celtic game of the season was at Ibrox, the first Ibrox. Rangers had never beaten Celtic in a league game before. The game finished Rangers 5, Celtic 0. And the reason John Barker made history is that he scored 3 goals that day. And he is therefore the first Rangers player ever to score a hat-trick against Celtic. There has only been 10 players ever score a competitive hat-trick for Rangers against Celtic. There's only 5 done it in a league game. Even Ali McCoist has never done it in a league game. He only done it in cup ties. Who's the 5 players? John Barker, R.C. Hamilton, Torry Gillick, Jimmy Duncanson, Johnny Hubbard. Right, so Absolutely. Gives him a special place in Rangers history because he scored this hat-trick against Celtic. The following year, in 1894, Rangers played Celtic in the Scottish Cup final, the first ever Rangers-Celtic Scottish Cup final. And I'm about, again, to try if this works. That's a famous picture in Rangers history. That is the first ever Rangers Scottish Cup winning team in 1894. They beat Celtic 3-1 at Hampden. The player on the extreme right, sitting with his arms folded, is John Barker. John Barker scored that day as well. So he scored in the first win over them. He scored the first hat-trick against them. And he scored in the first ever Scottish Cup final between the teams that Rangers won. So he has got all kinds of good things going for him. He actually only was at Rangers for another couple of years. He stayed to 1896. He lost his place in the left wing to another winger called Alex Smith. Went back to Linthouse. He played 84 games. He scored 34 goals, 7 of them against Celtic. And I've just told you about 5 of them were. And the last thing to mention about him, he ended up actually working at Govan Shipyards. Believe it or not. He gave up football quite young and he ended up working in the shipyards. The last thing to mention about him is that about 6 or 7 years ago, I wrote an article about him on the Follow website. And I got contacted by the guys that run the Founders Trail, who also do the restoration of Rangers graves. And they'd read my article and they hadn't realised he was the first player ever to score a hat-trick against Celtic. And they found his grave in Craigton Cemetery, which overlooks Ibrox. So if you ever go to Craigton Cemetery now, that plaque is there beside his grave to recognise his contribution to Rangers Football Club as a thanks from the Rangers support. So, John Barker, not a name in the Hall of Fame. He wasn't there that long, didn't play that many games, didn't win that many medals, but the first player to score a hat-trick against Celtic. How's that, Kenneth?
That's quite mad, isn't it? When you think that he's involved in all 3 of those games. That
scored in them all.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. But you look at that and you think, even that little, fact that if it's in there, mate, it's been long lost. That it took us 5 years to beat them. I didn't know that. When they first.
There was friendlies. I think they'd beat them in a couple of friendlies in the first few years, but in the 4 major tournaments, they hadn't beaten them at one of the end of the tournaments.
Which is kind of bizarre when you think about it, because Rangers were an established club already, weren't they? So, as you say, they're getting their pick of the bunch, so to speak. And that is a left winger that's a goal scorer. Could we do with one of them now? He's got a great grandson or something like that we could call on. But that's a fantastic story, Davey. I really like these because I find that, I don't know if you understand or get what I mean by it, but I find stories like that really quite humbling. They kind of humble me a bit when you realise that the club is so steeped in history that, my ignorance knows no bounds, mate. I'm not clued up with stuff like this, but I genuinely do feel that sometimes when you're sitting reading through these things or you're telling me these things, that it makes you feel that size. And that Rangers is such a massive history that when you're a historian, you know all of this, but I don't, Davey. I look at it and I just find it incredible to think that there's yet another wee tiny little piece of Rangers history that I knew nothing about. I couldn't have told you that. I could never have known that. And I have read history books. Well, it is, but at the same time, I have read a lot of books about Rangers, but I have never heard that one, mate. Never. So that is fantastic. And again, even the fact that, as you say, he wasn't there that long. He ends up working in the shipyards, and it is crazy when you think about today's society that a player would not be doing that, would he? I mean, it's just incredible.
4 years at Rangers, you don't need to work again. I don't think, if you're good enough. So John Barker's he's not in the Hall of Fame. He's not going to be. He's not one of the giants of Rangers for back then. But there's only one player can be the first to do something, isn't there? And he happens to be the first that scored the hat-trick against Celtic. So you just can't take it away from him. It's actually as simple as that. And it's incredible actually that the last player to score a league hat-trick against Celtic was Johnny Hubbard. 1955. It's before even I was born. Willie Johnson got one in the Glasgow Cup in the late 60s. McCoy's got one in the League Cup final in 1984. They won the Glasgow Cup final in 1986. That's it. That's it since. It's bizarre.
It is very, very strange because we've had plenty of good goal scorers and we've given them plenty of hidings. So it shows you that, when you look at it and you think that is a little bit of an oddity in terms of a factual oddity, if you like, that so few players have done that. It's incredible. But then you look at them and I don't think there's been that many of theirs have scored against us. In hat tricks, you don't see them very often in these games, do you, when you think about it?
I think Dembele did. I don't want to think about that. The only Celtic hat-trick I've ever seen against Rangers, Harry Hood scored it in a League Cup semi-final at Hampden of 1973, I think it was. But again, you're going back. Geez, I've just went back 50 odd years, haven't I?
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, John Barker. So hopefully people find that interesting. If not, I know it is a long time ago. So we'll go to June the 29th. Far more up to date. And it's not as good a story, this one, I'm afraid. June the 29th, 2017. So we're not going back that far this time. Rangers make their return to European football after a 6-year absence by playing Luxembourg's Progress Niederkorn at Ibrox in the first qualifying round of the Europa League. It's a game that ended in a 1-0 win. Kenny Miller scored the only goal. The manager was the one and only Pedro Gaxinha. What do you remember of that night?
What do I remember of that night? Not a huge amount, mate, because if I remember right, I was on holiday. I was in Portugal or something like that. But I remember watching it, managing to watch it. And I don't remember huge amounts about it. But what I can remember is that we should have won by a lot more. We should have won by 4 or 5 anyway. The game should have been out of sight. And weirdly having a little bit of the fear about the away leg, which we all know, but genuinely having a little bit of fear about the week after, because I thought I'd seen enough about us that we would get through. But us back at that particular period, and we weren't a good side, Davey. We weren't. So you had no idea what was going to happen. So what I really remember about it is not a lot, if the truth be known, because I'm sure I was in, I can't remember where I was, mate, but I was away on holiday, I'm sure, and I as I say, I only kind of managed to see it, if I remember right, it was literally on my phone or something like that. But no.
Actually, I was on holiday as well. I wasn't at that game. I was in Canada.
Is that right?
We were visiting relatives. I pressed the gamble button, hoping we would get an away draw first, because I was coming back at the weekend, so I missed the home game. Unfortunately, I was back in time to see the away game in the telly. We won't talk about that. I'm going to read out the team. I'll read out the team that played that night, just to show you. This was a team that Rangers went into a European campaign with. All right. Wes Foderingham was in goal. The back four was James Tavernier, a man who was ever present in good and bad years. David Bates, centre half, beside a recent signing called Fabio Cardoso, who I think went on to a pretty decent career actually after the left Rangers, with the left back being Captain Lee Wallace. 3 in midfield, I think it's 3 in midfield. Well, Jason Holt, who Mark Warburton had signed the year before. Nico Cranshaw, who I think was a good player, but done by the time he came anywhere near us. And another recent signing, one of Caixinha's better signings, Ryan Jack, who we had signed from Aberdeen. And the three up front, on the right, was someone called Dalcio, who I must admit to having not too many memories of even what he looked like, never mind anything else. Kenny Miller, who obviously scored the goal, and Martin Waghorn, who I had actually kind of half forgotten he really played under Caixinha. And the three substitutes that came on that night were Jordan Rossiter, who replaced Jason Holt. Dalcio went off to be replaced by another recent signing from Caixinha, Daniel Candeias, who was a decent player. And Waghorn went off to be replaced up front by another recent signing, Alfredo Morelos. Yeah, I know. So, as I say, I've written down here, Caixinha had made a few signings and there was a couple of them still to come in. But there's kind of three categories for me. There was actually three pretty good signings. There was Morelos, Jack and Candeias, who all had, well, two especially had really good Rangers careers. And then there was three others that he brought in that I would describe as good players, but it just didn't work out. There was Graham Dorrans, there was Cardozo, and there was Bruno Alves, who top Portuguese international, 100 odd caps for Portugal. I mean, it should have worked out, but it didn't. And then you get the ones who were just diddies, for want of a better expression. There was Dalcio, and there was the two Mexicans, Herrera and Carlos Pena, who were just complete nonsense. And I don't really want to think about them. So, is it any great surprise that Caixinha ended up only surviving another few months and then get the bullet?
No, because if you look at that team on paper, with all respect to Progress Niederkorn, we should have pumped them senseless. We didn't. And a lot of that will be down to the madness of Pedro and the way we would set up an awful lot of time, Davey, as you well know, where I lost count of the amount of times I would be sitting my seat up at Ibrox. And I'm going to swear, but you would actually look at your boy and go, what the fuck are we doing? Because you had no idea. You're like, what the fuck is it we're doing? I have no clue. You know, 5 up front at times, 2 at the back. It was just mad.
The memories.
Absolutely mad. And that's probably why. But you look at that team on paper and yeah, there's kind of weak areas in that team. There's no question of that. However, they should have been more than capable of beating a team that finished 4th in Luxembourg, with all respect to them, because they weren't that bad a side, to be fair. They were seen a hell of a lot worse teams in Europe over the years, Davey, but it's a horrible stain in our history, that particular I'm going to say it, that particular manager and that particular result, because you know, a week later, and you'll remember this as well, because we all do, standing in a bush. No.
Over a hedge.
Exactly. Just no. Stop it. So, yeah, and that, I mean, you look at the signings, as you say, you've got Alfie there, you've got Ryan Jack there, they're good players, really good players. Graham Dorrans, as you say, is a boy that was really unlucky at us.
I think so.
You know, he was, because he came having suffered a bad injury, and then he got another bad injury when he first got here, and it just didn't work for him. But he was a very tidy player, and you thought, well, he'll do well here, but it just didn't work for him. But I don't even know what else to say, mate. I just, as I say, it's kind of been deleted from my memory, that particular period in Rangers history, because sometimes you've just got to move on.
Pedro didn't last that much longer. I've got his overall record here. He only managed 26 games for Rangers, won 14, drew 4, lost 7, and he's the only permanent Rangers manager to have a 100% losing record against Celtic. I think we'll stop there, will we? We'll just move on.
Aye, and those particular games against Celtic, they were horrific. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think that's probably a lot of the reason why we all knew that, yeah, they had a better side than us at the time. We all knew that, Davy. But we also knew you can set up properly and you'll not be taking these kind of hidings. And I think that's kind of a number of things that did them, but those particular results against them weren't going to be they weren't going to be acceptable to anybody. You need to sort yourself out, and he had no way of knowing how to do it. That was how we all knew you get him out.
It was a bit like the day they appointed Russell Martin, the day they appointed Pedro Caixinha. Everybody said just said it straight away. Well, that won't work, didn't it? It was just anyway.
Maybe it's something that we've all said on this podcast over and over again. Whether it's been previous owners or directors or the current incumbents, whatever it's been, that you'll know lots of different things better than us. Football, the inner workings of football or business or whatever. You don't know our club any better than we do, and you just don't. And when we can categorically look at a manager or potential manager and just say, "Don't do it," I just wish they'd listen to us sometimes with stuff like that, because we're always right. That's the kind of the truthful thing about it. We are always, well, not always, but we always tend to be right. Put it that way.
Yeah, I think I'll move on before we get post-traumatic stress for this podcast. I think. June the 30th, 1986. So Rangers manager Graham Souness makes his first statement signing by breaking the world transfer record fee for a goalkeeper and paying £600,000 to Norwich City for England international goalkeeper Chris Woods. So Chris Woods, I've got this vague memory of him as a really young goalkeeper playing in the League Cup final for Nottingham Forest, Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest against Liverpool, because Shilton was cup tied or something. They'd signed him too late, and he played. He won a League Cup against Souness. Souness would have been playing for Liverpool at the time. He was in the bench in the European Cup final for them, so he had a European Cup medal, although he didn't play in the game. He won the League Cup game in Norwich. He was at the World Cup in Mexico as Peter Shilton's understudy. I mean, we have for years been watching Stuart Kennedy and Peter McCloy and Nicky Walker and Jim Stewart and all that, and then suddenly this guy appears. And with the total respect to every goalkeeper I saw up until Chris Woods signed, and I saw a lot of Rangers goalkeepers before I saw Chris Woods, he completely changed what a Rangers goalkeeper was for me. He was the first one that actually, he looked like an athlete. He was the first one that trained like an outfield player. He was the first one that actually, he wouldn't have looked out of place in any sport, and he just looked like, and commanded his area, good at cross balls, good shots. He's worth it. And for me, that signing was the one that set the ball rolling. I know everybody talks about Terry Butcher as the one that set the ball rolling, but Woods actually came before him. And he was a smashing keeper. One Watson. I might talk about his honours in a minute or two. Andy tried to strangle Frank McAvenny, which gives him an extra brownie point for me as well. So what's your memories of Chris Woods?
I'd put him in my top 3 Rangers keepers of all time. I genuinely do. I know a lot of folk would maybe debate him or Stefan Klos. I think the top 2 kind of speak for themselves if you're being fair. But Chris Woods is there. I mean, I was a young lad. I was 16. And what I remember more than anything else about Rangers goalkeepers is Peter McCloy. And not much else, if you know what I mean. There was other keepers there, as you've just said. But for me, when Chris Woods turned up, Chris Woods, it's to explain again the younger viewers that English football was massive at the time, but we got match of the day, and that was it. We didn't get live games so much back then, and match of the day was something that sports scene and match of the day that you kind of tuned in to get your football. And Chris Woods was a kind of world-renowned top keeper. So, as you said, people talking about Terry Butcher. Terry Butcher was also very well known. but so was Chris Woods. He was on a par, I would suggest, with kind of Terry Butcher in terms of the fact that the football world knew him. And to go and, as you say, spend that kind of money on a goalkeeper was unheard of, just literally unheard of. But to turn around and, as you say, when he turns up, and you remember this every bit as well as I do, it was the confidence that the guy had. There was an air of confidence and a commanding confidence about him that you didn't see in goalkeepers back then, if you know what I mean. Goalkeepers were still of the mould of Alan Rough, but when a guy bent a ball, they went, "What the hell was that?" You know, do you know what I mean? This guy kind of knew this was a top tier football player, and as you say, when he turned up and you seen the ability and as you say, the athleticism of the guy, the ability to go for, jump and be back up, and the speed of the keeper. That was what I noticed more than anything else. And as I say, for me, I'll always put Andy Goram there, I'll put Alan McGregor there, and I'd put Chris Woods just below that, along with Stephen Kloss. We've been incredibly fortunate with the quality of keepers that we've had over the last 40 years now, if you think about it. But a wonderful signing. I mean, a proper statement signing, which, if you compare it to now, it would be like signing, I don't know, try to think of the England keeper at the minute, and I'm not a big fan of him, so I'm not even going to mention him.
But I was going to say that. He his gloves, if that's an expression.
but the point I'm making is it was such a huge signing. Wasn't it? It was just incredible to think. Look at the England goalkeeper coming up here. Incredible.
I think I always remember. I was at Souness's first game at Easter Road, the famous battle at Easter Road on the first day of the season. And when the stramash happened in the centre circle, Chris Woods was in there trying to sort folk out straight away. You could tell right away he wasn't just up for the money. He was one of the guys that wanted to win trophies as well. I'll give you some of his numbers. 230 games for Rangers, 119 clean sheets, which is 52%, which makes Chris Woods the Rangers goalkeeper with most clean sheets percentage-wise than any other Rangers goalkeeper who's played more than 100 games for the club. And to give you a comparison, Alan McGregor was 43% and Andy Goram was 42%. Now, to be fair, he had some bloody good defenders in front of him. Peak Terry Butcher was in front of him for a lot of the time. Gough came in, Graham Roberts said, but that's highly impressive stuff. And remember, he broke the world record for minutes without conceding a goal in his first season. What was that? 1,100 odd minutes.
That's right.
Then he conceded against Hamilton Accies and they knocked us out the cup. He was, for me, as I said earlier on, I just think Rangers goalkeeping changed the day he arrived. And whenever we talk about this great legacy of Rangers goalkeepers, we kind of usually start with his name, which is a wee bit unfair maybe to some of the ones before him, because Pete McCloy was a good goalkeeper. Billy Ritchie was a good goalkeeper, but it just felt that we had just went up this notch by bringing him in. And to bring this full circle, I suppose, we actually talked about his successor about half an hour ago, because when Chris Woods left, it was entirely because of his nationality. It wasn't the fact that he was done. It wasn't the fact that he was over the hill in any way, shape or form. In fact, he was the first choice England goalkeeper at the time, and he was the first choice England goalkeeper for a few years after it as well, when he left to go to Sheffield Wednesday. It was simply because we needed more Scots in the team, and there was this bloody good Scot playing for Hibs at the time, so we could afford to do it. But he is a member of the Hall of Fame, Woods, and I think he absolutely deserves to be in there. And I see he's going to the World Cup as well, because he's Scotland's goalkeeping coach. Yeah,
and he's such a quiet guy these days. But see if you ever see an interview with him, he's got nothing but fondness for the club, and that's a great thing as well. But you're hitting me with an education, man. I didn't know that about that stat. The 52% is incredible.
It is, isn't it?
It's genuinely incredible, aye. And you know, I mean that world record, that I can always remember the whole place going crazy. If you remember it when we were counting it down.
I know. We're waiting for the 31 to come up on the clock.
So, you know, it's incredible when you look back on it, Davey, but you're right. It's almost look, you know, BC and AD. It's before Chris Woods, isn't it? It's and after Chris Woods, if you know what I mean, because you're right. It's kind of where Rangers, in a weird kind of sense, have flipped that, and the keepers that we've had. I mean, you look at that and how lucky we have been, and even, you know, don't particularly want to talk about them. But you look at the quality of keeper we've had over the years, comparison to them, and it's been kind of nuts that we've managed to. And even Jack Butland, who's not in the same bracket as the other four, is still a decent keeper, Davey. And we've just been very, very fortunate with the keepers that we've had over the years. And as I say, Woodsy goes into my top three, guaranteed top three. I thought he was a better keeper than Stefan Klos. Always did.
I think there's definitely an argument in your favour there. I think 52%. There's one argument for a start. The other one I'll throw at you was that what year was it? The year was Maurice Johnson, 89-90. Rangers only conceded 19 league goals all season that season. Now, everybody thought that wouldn't get broken, and then we did it in the 55 season. We conceded even less, but 19, and I think it was 36 games back then, at a time when Aberdeen had a right good team, Dundee United had a right good team, Hearts had a right good team. Conceding 19 goals in 36 games was absolutely outrageous, I thought, and Woods was a lot to do with that. So, Chris Woods, 30th of June 1986. We'll finish with another signing one. So, July the 1st, 2000, so it's not too long ago. Now, we actually signed two players this day, two players from the same league, but I'm only really going to talk about one of them. But I'll tell you what happened. July the 1st, 2000, Dutch manager Dick Advocaat splashes out on two Dutch players, two Dutch defenders. £4.5 million to Feyenoord for Bert Konterman, who we're not going to talk about, or not much anyway. And £3.75 million to AZ Alkmaar for Fernando Ricksen. So Ricksen and Konterman actually signed on the same day, July the 1st, 2000. I'll just very briefly say, I might talk about Konterman whenever the anniversary comes round of that goal he scored against Celtic, because that way I can say something nice about him. Because otherwise, I would just talk about how absolute calamitous a defender he was, and we've had enough calamities in this programme already. Ricksen. So Ricksen came in basically to replace Perini at right back. And I think, to be fair, you need to be honest about these things, I thought he was a bit of a bomb scare for quite a bit of his early time at Rangers. I remember he get hauled off at Parkhead after about half an hour a day. He was getting absolutely tortured. I remember him getting red carded at Parkhead in the first half, and a day he get tortured again. But as time went on, I think what the big change that happened to him was actually Advocaat leaving and McLeish coming in, funnily enough. He played more in midfield once McLeish came in. He still played right back sometimes, but he went in, and I thought he was a far better midfielder than he was a fullback. I thought his tackling was a bit too ropey to be a fullback against a decent winger. So under McLeish, he won the Scottish Cup in 2002 against Celtic. He won the treble in 2003. And then as captain, he lifted the League Cup and the Helicopter Sunday League in 2005. So 6 trophies. He played more games under Alec McLeish than any other player, which is a wee stat to throw in. And he's now in the Hall of Fame. I'll do his stats and stuff later on, but what's your memories, or how do you look back on the Rangers career of Fernando Ricksen?
Well, I'll start very quickly with Big Bert and get him out of the way, because that'll take about 20 seconds. The goal's an absolute belter. I'm sure everybody that's watching has seen it many, many times. It's just a rocket, and it's the only thing that he managed to get right in his entire time, probably at Rangers, really, wasn't it? Other than that, the best way I could describe him to the younger watchers would be put the curly hair on, Robin proper, and that's what you've probably got, isn't it? Is a kind of very similar type of player. On Fernando Ricksen, I stay up here in Newton Mearns, mate. I was quite fortunate. He stayed up here. And some of these antics were infamous, you know. And
is that the Union Jack in the garden? The Union flag?
Oh, aye, lots and lots of different stories, mate. Honestly, Alan Thompson and others will got it, you know, from the other side of the city. But and he said that, believe it or not, the maniac stayed in the same street as Dick Advocat, and he was still running about like a maniac. So it was mad. But listen, what can you say about Fernando Ricksen? Again, you've hit me with a stat there that I didn't know. The fact that he played more times under Big Eck than anybody else. I didn't realise that either. He had a terrible start to his Rangers career, an absolutely terrible start. Third game in, and I'm sure you said about half an hour. I'm sure it was about 18 minutes he lasted at Parkhead, and we were 3-0 down, and a lot of it was down to him. Truth be known, he just had an absolute tragedy of an Old Firm debut. And as you say, he had a few bad performances at Parkhead. What I'm going to tell you about him, though, is that he actually came on to the game at right back. Eventually, he became a decent enough right back, but he totally changed when he got put in the midfield, and Alex McLeish gave him the captaincy, if you remember. And he just grew up almost overnight, didn't he? He just became, I've actually got to do grown-up stuff now, and I've got to do big things on this pitch. And he could hit a mean free kick. He ended up being an absolutely fantastic passer of the ball. You began to see that properly when he was in the middle of the pitch. He was the captain that, you know, if you remember back when Barry came back, and it shows you the respect that Barry had for him. That Barry was, no, you carry on, because Fernando had actually said, you're the captain, you take it. No, you carry on to the end of the season, and we'll see where we're at. Just a wonderful human being, and we all know what's happened to, you know, what happened to Fernando Ricksen, and nobody wants to see that happen to anyone. But he has a legacy at our football club. And the memories make me smile, and they do genuinely of Fernando. Even the bad ones kind of make me smile now, because a vastly underrated player is what I would say, Davey, in terms of the memories, because you have that kind of lodged in or imprinted in your head, the bad start. But when you actually look over his entire Rangers career, he was a fine player. And as I say, we all know what's happened to Fernando. And it's such a sad story. But yeah, it just makes me smile when I think about him, Davey.
Yeah. Funny you mentioned free kicks there. I think he scored this cracking free kick in a League Cup tie-up at Pittodrie in a midweek, and I think he saved Albert McLeish's job scoring that free kick that night, because we had just been knocked out of Europe by, not knocked out, we got beaten, but in Europe by that Maritimo away from home. We had a bad start to the season. He was under real pressure. I mean, I think if Aberdeen had knocked us out the League Cup that night, I think Murray might have sacked him. But he scored this brilliant free kick. He actually scored a free kick in that game. He scored a free kick in the semi-final against Dundee United when we beat them 7-1, and he scored a free kick in the final against Motherwell. So he scored 3 free kicks in 4 League Cup ties that season, and lifted it as the captain. So you can't do much more than that, I don't think. I'm totally with you in that. I thought the Helicopter Sunday season, he grew in. The armband made him grow into the jersey, if that makes sense. Remember, he took that 94th minute penalty at Tynecastle on the Wednesday night when hardly anybody could watch. The run-in was at its peak, and he put it away as if it was the easiest thing in the world. He was a massive reason why we won the league that season. Probably my last memory of him, apart from that absolutely horrendous disease that he got. Apart from that, my last memory of him at Ibrox, if you like, he fell out with Paul Le Guen, remember? And Le Guen sent him out on loan. I think he misbehaved pre-season or something, and Le Guen put him, and he went to Zenit. He went to Zenit St. Petersburg. And we played them in a friendly at Ibrox in a midweek. I can't remember we were out of Europe. I can't remember the reason, but we played them in a midweek anyway. And Ricksen played for Zenit, even though he was a Rangers player. He was on loan, but it was only a friendly. And he absolutely halved Chris Burke. It was about that height in the tackle. And the crowd went absolutely nuts. They were booing him all night, and ended up he get substituted, he get taken off. And I think that was the last time he played at Ibrox, because I think he then joined them permanently. I remember he was in the bench at Manchester the next season and stuff. I think you said he was daft. I think daft as a brush is probably the expression I'm looking for, because what a crazy thing to do that was. But it was just, to me, it was just the kind of daft things that he done. But 254 games, 20 goals, 6 winners' medals. No bad, is it? No bad. And in the Hall of Fame. I think if you had seen him after 18 months at Rangers and somebody had said to you he's going to end up being a Hall of Fame player for Rangers, you'd have got laughed at. But I think it shows the character he must have had to come back from a start like that. And as you say, he gave us a lot of memories, and it's just bloody tragic. The last memory we all have him is the way it all ended for him.
Aye, it's the most horrible disease imaginable. And listen, I'm going to say that, and I'll tell you what, when, the last few years of Fernando's life, the dignity that the man had was beyond comparable, actually. How he managed to stay that dignified is beyond me, because he's a better man than me for it. I'll tell you what, as I say, he might have been a daft young boy, but and I don't want to be too morbid here, but how you deal with your own mortality is a sign of the human being. And I've got nothing but admiration. I had nothing but huge admiration for him with the way he went about that. And again, I don't want to get too morbid about this, but as we get older, David, we lose people. We know that, and you see it with your own eyes. And as I say, just really quite proud. I don't know if it's because I was slightly older than him, but I get really quite proud of the boy for it, and the way he made sure that his family were looked after and stuff like that while he was going through that. I hold him in a very, very high esteem. I really do. And it still makes me smile, though. The memories make me giggle, because what a boy. And as I say, some of the stories that went about up here about him were just classic. Genuine classics. He was a bit of a boy. He enjoyed a wee drink of a weekend, and would annoy his neighbours, particularly if they were of a Celtic persuasion. Oh. So a good laugh.
Yeah. So July the 1st, remembering Fernando Ricksen, who was signed in the year 2000. So Kenny, that takes us to the end of another 7 days. Did you find it as educating as you said you were going to?
I did. I've learned a few things, Davey. John Barker and the 52% stats, and I mean, listen, it's nothing but information city and central here for me. I love it, and as I say, I said to you the last time I was on, Davey, I absolutely love that you're capable of telling me stuff that I have no clue about with Rangers, and never would have a clue about when you're going through something like this particular type of show, where you're giving me a week and you're looking at stuff, and the way you bring it across them is fantastic. So thank you for having me.
I just hope I can keep it going for week after week after week. The pressure's on to keep it as interesting, isn't it? Anyway, so that's the end of this episode of This Week in History. I'd like to thank Kenny for being my sparring partner for the night. Thank the sponsors, as always, and thank you, the viewers. And if there's any comments or any questions you have, feel free to put them in there. The use of pictures came through comments that were made by one of our viewers. If there's anything else you think would improve the show, just let us know. So that was June the 25th till July the 1st, until we start on July the 2nd next time. From Kenny, from myself, bye for now.
The Four Lads podcast is sponsored by Rhino Express, Clydeview Joinery, Athol Industrial Solutions Limited, and CSD Air Conditioning, in partnership with Black Rooster and Art of Gold. Thank you for listening to or watching the podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show.